Thanks everyone for joining for the second breakout of today, highlighting stories of cross-sector collaboration in a COVID-19 crisis. A quick thing before we begin, I'd like to introduce Liz Hart. Some of you might know this already, but because these sessions have so much valuable content, we want to make sure we hear from everybody and ensure time for Q&A. So if I hold up this heart, it's just an invitation to wrap up your thoughts. So with that, I'd like to introduce our two wonderful speakers today, Jenny Poon, who's the founder and CEO of HUUB. Hi, Jenny. And Katie Johnson, who's the director of Next Street. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Katie, to start us off.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Pull up my slides here. And hi, everyone. My name is Katie Johnson, and I'm a director of a mission-driven advisory firm called Next Street. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Next Street soon, but first, I want to tell you about my friend Brittany. At the end of February, Brittany and I sat across a dinner table, and she excitedly proclaimed, "I was able to pay myself for the first time in years." Brittany had started a clothing firm or clothing store a few years ago, and she'd moved beyond debt to breaking even and now building an income for herself. We toasted to her growing success and business and didn't know that just a few weeks later, she'd have to shutter her doors, at least temporarily. This will let me actually advance the slides. So today we're here to talk about efforts to support businesses like my friends through partnerships, ecosystem-wide collaboration, and by sharing best practices across communities. You know, ecosystem is a word I know we've spent a lot of time on in the past few days, but it can be a little bit jargony in our world sometimes. So if folks want to enter their own definition for ecosystem into the chat, I think it's a great way to kind of synthesize some of the thoughts we've had. And also let us know what ecosystem you represent. I'm here in Chicago or Greater Cook County today. And we hope all of this helps you identify assets in your community and different partnerships and models that you can bring forward to spark positive change. We've got a couple comments coming through. So I'll begin our story by introducing our team here at Next Street. Next Street is a mission-driven advisory firm revolutionizing how our clients provide capital, customers, and services to small businesses and entrepreneurs. Next Street equips clients with strategies and tools to drive equitable small business growth for a more inclusive US economy. As an anti-racist organization, Next Street stands in solidarity with our Black and Latinx colleagues and the Black and Brown communities that we serve across the country. And we know that this work is a matter of life and death. We take this experience and our firm's background into a collaborative and innovative model that we'll talk about today. But really, this model began a couple of years back. It has a strong foundation and serves as a model for other communities in which we work. So this began in 2018 through an ecosystem assessment where we learned about the capital and services available to small businesses here in Chicago. That work highlighted that Black and Latinx-owned small businesses earned roughly half the revenue per employee as the average Chicago business. The report, which we produced alongside Chicago Community Trust, the Community Reinvestment Fund with support from the Chicago Community Trust, JP Morgan Chase, and the Polk Brothers Foundation. And that actually resulted in a series of priority initiatives that are being managed through the Chicago Inclusive Growth Coalition, which is there in the center. Some of the work that we're actually moving forward through that Chicago Inclusive Growth Coalition are things like industry-specific strategies for construction and arts industries, looking at creation of a shared set of impact metrics to help advance as a community. And that work is being led by some peer-selected organizations in Axion and Small Business Majority. Ultimately, all of that collaboration set us up and made us ready to collaborate during this time of COVID recovery. So that's where we'll spend our time today. I know we've gotten a few chats in, so I just want to take a look real quick and see what we've got.
You're good, Katie, just folks saying where they're calling in from. So we have, Evie from San Juan, Puerto Rico. We have CJ from Phoenix, Hark in Denver, Teresa in New York City. So no questions yet, but lots of good chatter. Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. So starting at where we are for COVID-19, bringing that collaboration with us. In March and April, we got together and we at Next Street, along with others from the Chicago Inclusive Growth Coalition and Network, saw that some emerging dynamics as a result of COVID. As we all know, small businesses need our help right now, and this is particularly true for entrepreneurs of color. So 25% of Illinois businesses are concentrated in industries most impacted by COVID-19. And this is even more so true for traditionally disenfranchised populations, where the percentage is closer to 6 to 17 basis points higher. In particular, I'm sure you're seeing some common themes in your community too, where restaurants, salons, gyms, and the like are often most impacted. And this is something that we've seen here locally. So, Fueled to Action, a group of thoughtful advisors across the philanthropic, government, business, and nonprofit sectors emerged from across the small business ecosystem. So first of all, I know something Steve Case said yesterday in one of the sessions just about the value of collaboration, and that's something that we've been exercising since day one of our collective work. So we met as a collaborative to hear needs. What do businesses need most right now? Capital? Absolutely. We know that that's always a need. But in particular, grants we felt like were very important during this time, given the collective was worried about the amount of debt that businesses were taking on. Advice, this was actually the #1 request and need that we heard. Folks felt like there was sort of a word salad out there of PPP and EIDL and all the other financing options that were out there, and businesses needed help navigating that landscape. They also were having to do a lot of things for the first time, right? Putting their business online, pivoting to new strategies, and business advising was a really critical piece of that. Yet there was very little funding actually being directed in that direction versus for capital. So with that input, we built a program along with 5 founding partners, and that's Accion, Chicago Trend, Chicago Urban League, the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the Women's Business Development Center. And we had support from a number of generous investors as well. So Cook County is providing all of our funding for a grant fund, as well as some of our technical assistance or business advising work. And Chicago Community Trust has served as an early champion for our work and helped to bring on and sort of inspire others in the philanthropic community. The MacArthur Foundation, the McCormick Foundation, and Polk Brothers Foundation have all helped to jumpstart our work here in the Cook County area. So together with our founding partners, we built an innovative program that brings together capital and services together for small businesses. So that's through the 3 components that you'll see kind of on the upper part of your screen there. First, through optional group webinars and one-on-one business advising. So the 2 of those 2 services combined together for our business advising services. And then finally, recovery grants. And it's our hope that bringing together the capital and the services together actually gives an overall greater impact than either on its own, which I think is a good summary for our collective overall, that we're better than the sum of our parts. And some of that work actually has been seen through models like the JPMC Ascend network and things like that, where bringing those pieces together is really critical. So how it all comes together. If you're a small business, our broad network of partners might have a relationship with you and from across the county. And so those small businesses might be referred to our website. Well, they'll sign up for a webinar, maybe some business advising, maybe that recovery grant. So say they go to that webinar for the first time and they'll learn about recovery and resiliency tools. So what does financial recovery mean? What do you need to be preparing for operationally and the like? After that, perhaps they'll go see a service provider next for one-on-one business advising. They might learn that they've qualified for one of the $10,000 recovery grants. And that one-on-one business advisor will help them understand what are the most impactful ways to use that funding, and also maybe help them prepare their financials in order to access other capital or to set themselves up the best financially for recovery. And so then, maybe they decide that they want to go through a few more sessions to complete that work, after which a few months later we'll follow up to understand how they're doing, how much impact this is making on their, how much impact this has made on their business. So in order to get all of this process together and to process businesses from so many different parts of the network, we've used shared tools. And so we've used a shared intake tool, shared impact and evaluation tools, marketing, and the like. And that has all helped create efficiencies and also help us understand the collective impact of our work. So overall, we found that combining business advising and grant capital maximizes our impact. And also leveraging a diverse network of experienced partners has helped us reach businesses most in need and reach communities across the county. We also have noticed that sharing tools increases efficiency and also the amount of time that each business service organization can spend with entrepreneurs. So another chat question I want to learn from you, and hopefully we can spend some time in the Q&A on this too. What has worked in your community around COVID recovery? What lessons can we learn from you? I know that one's a little bit of a thinker, so I'll move on and maybe we can come back to that too as we go into the Q&A session. And what's the result that we expect? Well, the pandemic isn't over. We know that our partners are already bringing help and serving their communities. One example is with Motor Graphics in the Chicago suburb of Niles. This is a minority and woman-owned business that works with one of our one-on-one partners, consulting experts in the Illinois Hispanic Bureau of Commerce, or IHCC. Motor Graphics was able to pivot following the onset of COVID to begin supplying PPE to support recovery for their clients. So specifically, if you can imagine, Motor Graphics had been, part of their business was providing maybe some swag from events and things like that. If you can imagine the bags that have the corporate names on them, or hey, hand sanitizer with corporate names on them. And actually those hand sanitizers, which maybe at one point they would have provided a couple hundred at a time for an event, they now had access to wholesalers of that, where they could distribute it to their clients more broadly. So they scored a major casino contract for that, for instance. They also had access to plastic and plexiglass that they would use to print signage, and they can actually use that to put up protective barriers for their clients. So this pivot didn't happen immediately though. During the first few months, Motor Graphics was worried about surviving and needed access to PPP. And so their bank wasn't actually responsive to them on that, and IHCC helped connect them with bank funders who would be. They also have helped Motor Graphics access a number of large contract relationships that they've built over the past few years. So when all of those organizations were looking to reopen, Motor Graphics was well positioned to help them serve those new needs. So overall, we hope today's presentation has helped you identify your community's assets and some of those partnership and models to spark that positive change. And so the question I also want to bring to you, and maybe we can open this up now, is what are the assets in your community, and maybe some of those other models that can help improve your community resiliency.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. We had a couple of questions that came in. I think you were talking about the average dollar amount received by entrepreneurs. Can you mention that again?
Sure. Through the grant program, all of the recovery grants are $10,000 each. And overall, the program is targeting generally smaller entrepreneurs, small businesses with fewer than 20 employees, knowing that some of the other programs like PPP, for instance, sometimes target a little bit larger organizations.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. And then we had a question come in from Kristen. I know Nexttree has so many great partners. Can you talk about the systems that you use and how you got the partners to use the same systems? It sounds like you have a lot of established partners, so how are you tracking them? How's the communication happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. Everybody had their own intake system, as you can imagine, and how are they all using the same one? For now, we're using a program called, I'll talk to you about with the what, and then we'll talk to you about how we all kind of came together on that. So there's a program that we're using called Submittable, which is sort of allows you to do different forms of intake. Allows us basically to do some kind of survey logic, but then we can also use it sort of as a database to match on the back end. And how we got there, I have to really compliment my partners within our program team on this. They have a lot of best practices already through how we serve small businesses on an everyday basis. But then they also spent a lot of time with those 5 founding partners to understand what their processes were, what data did they collect in their intake, and the like. And actually there's quite a bit of overlap in the data that we all collect. And so making sure that we were collecting the information that was most important to those different partners and meeting with them to make sure that we were addressing their needs. We were able to kind of use this shared intake tool. And then we export data from that where they can actually upload it into their systems. So the goal is that while this is a shared intake program, they can still sort of have access to the data themselves.
Awesome. So the technicalities, the how and the what. Thanks, Katie. I think before we go into open Q&A, I'd love to kind of transition over to Jenny first to kind of share some of her thoughts, and then we can kind of have an open discussion with everybody. Jenny, you want to tag team and pass it over to you?
Yeah. Do you want me to go through my pieces? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Those were great overview. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Poon. I'm the founder of COUHOOTS. COUHOOTS is a co-working incubator entrepreneurship center space in Central Phoenix, Phoenix, Arizona. And we've been around since 2010. So we're lucky enough to have experienced 2 rounds of recessions for entrepreneurs and have taken a lot of our learnings over the last decade and brought them to the city of Mesa to work through building a platform to help them better navigate supporting entrepreneurs at this time. So let me share my screen. Let's see here. Hope this will work. I'm assuming you guys can all see this okay. Okay, so when COVID hit, when COVID hit in our city and in our valley, I kind of sat back and I watched what was happening. How did different people respond as all of the businesses in our co-working space and the businesses that we knew and supported over the years all kind of came rushing to us, asking us for what was the next best step. I looked to the cities and I saw almost a pattern across the different cities of how they approached supporting entrepreneurs. And I'm not sure if this happened in your city, but I am assuming that it might be very similar. They all jumped on phone calls and literally Googled what businesses existed in their cities and asked and devoted resources to that. I saw them get on calls and they would say, okay, what our plan is to spend the next 6 weeks to redirect our data centers to call businesses to understand what we can do to help them. And that was pretty frustrating coming from a entrepreneur support organization perspective, because it's pretty obvious what entrepreneurs need right now, which is really, they need money and customers, right? But the realization there was they really didn't have data to be able to reach those people. They didn't have databases. They could have reached out to different partners, but we all kind of often work in silos. And so the solution really that we came to was taking what we've learned in building co-working and community spaces and applying it into a technical community online space that allows the city to truly leverage and build on top of that. And so we built what we call HUUB, and it's a platform for cities that holds all of the events, holds upcoming webinars, holds a library of resources, not just what the governor puts out, but truly all of the webinars that partners are creating in one space. Because if you know entrepreneurs, we're only worried about what we need to deal with right now. So if you're gonna tell me about how to build my team and I have no employees, that's not a session that I really care about. So when the RFP came out for the city on how they can better support small businesses, of course, every city did the grant piece. That's an easy piece. The second piece around truly supporting resiliency and moving forward was a challenging piece. And their recommendation or their request in their RFP was for partners to build webinars, and they would take those webinars and put them on their website. Well, those webinars on a website are not trackable, are not measurable. There's nothing you can do with them to move forward with any of that data. And so our recommendation was to put it into a library so that businesses can manage that and search for what they need and find it as they need it. On top of that, there's industry groups and a chat function that allows the businesses to directly connect with the different entrepreneurs within their community. And our big goal here was to truly shift the responsibility that the government felt at a local level to solely be the solution provider, to make that be a truly community-led piece, which is what we do in general, right, as ecosystem builders. And so I put this here as a reminder that it's impossible for our government alone to save our businesses. There's no way, even if they scaled their economic development team to 50 people, they're currently 3, there's no way they can still serve the thousands of entrepreneurs and businesses in that city. It truly does require getting a team a community together to rally around them. And so through launching this platform, we're a few months in, so we've piloted with the city of Mesa. We've discovered a lot of things. And the point of this session is to truly share the tactical things we created. If there's a few people from Arizona here on this call, if you know me, you know I'm like an automation nut. I am the woman that created a button that allows us to make coffee every morning so I don't have to do it. And so we really looked at how do we measure this work, and how do we use this data and this information to constantly improve upon building this community so that it's almost democratized, right? And so some of the things that came out of this platform was realizing that people want wayfinding and they want resources. And the resources are plenty, they just need help finding it. And so one key component was getting people to understand what was available to them. And when we got them to understand that, the onboard rate for people getting onto our platform was 98%. So we built a lot. My background is in marketing and design as well, but we built a lot of leading funnels to get businesses onboarded, which led to this 98% onboarding rate. We also really focused on like making sure that we were inclusive in our communication, which led to 60% female-owned, women-owned businesses on the platform, 50% entrepreneurs of color on the platform. And in our last report, we do these monthly reports, 65% of the businesses on the platform saw some kind of positive growth. And I'll get to that in our next slide. We also measured what are the key resources that they need right now, which led to actually a pivoting in the programming that was being delivered by several of the partners. We originally thought that it was going to be a wide range. The city couldn't even tell us exactly who their community was. But after getting reports back and the feedback back and the surveys back, we saw that, of course, most of them were Main Street businesses, oftentimes retail and restaurant, and then a good chunk in actually the education space, just because of the nature of that city. And so the resources they needed was marketing and financial, which allowed us to pivot. And so there's 4 things I really want to go through in what we learned. The first one is measuring what matters. Not just measuring once. After talking to several cities, a lot of times what happens is they run one survey and then they think that that's enough. And then years later, they're still relying on that information to make decisions. So we built a live dashboard. Again, just using some of the basic tools that exist out there. And surveying regularly. So within our platform, we can run polls on an immediate basis and get feedback and immediately pivot what content is being pushed out by different partners. This is just the dashboard on demographics. And one piece I really love about this one is on the far left side, we were able to see who was the most vulnerable at this time, who was closest to closure, and immediately devote resources to those people and prioritize that support. But this gave a good picture of what kind of businesses make up that city. And we run the survey nearly every month. And what we're looking for is a change in one stat that's actually right here. This is our general sentiment score. And that's how you feel about your business currently. And we're seeing as we move forward in the months that this number is slowly creeping up. So it shows the confidence level of your city and your businesses. And so measuring that also helps us shift our city's perspective on what is important to measure. Because as anybody who's worked with a city knows, I think the top tier metric that they're looking for is job creation. But what they don't look at is all of the little steps that lead to job creation, because job creation doesn't necessarily show the strength of a business, right? Income, revenue, net revenue, those are some indicators that are also important, but often aren't measured at a city level. So this was really, really important to us to measure and track a wide set of questions for the entrepreneurs. The second piece we really focused on was inclusion. So we, as part of this platform, we handled technical assistant management and measurement. City created a fund. Having been a partner as a part of technical assistant funds in the past and being incredibly frustrated with that process, we decided it was time to reinvent that, mainly because it was just so much paperwork to manage that process. And so we essentially built a tool that allows our advisors to seamlessly connect with entrepreneurs that need it. So an entrepreneur would get an allotment of credits. They would go onto our advisor portal and they would go and find the advisor that best fits their needs. And you can see that actually we're really focused on making sure that our advisor network is really diverse as well. And one of the big pieces here is that we've seen is oftentimes when partners get added to technical assistance programs, their network isn't as wide as ours is because we're a co-working space. We serve hundreds of experts on a regular basis. So it was really easy for us to pull this huge community together that was diverse and not just diverse in terms of ethnicity, but diverse in industry to come together. So if you needed help with financials, specifically in restaurants, right? You run a restaurant, that's a specific kind of financial support that you need. And so you would be able to find this here. Another piece that often is hard for cities. I love working with cities because we're always aligned. We're aligned in the need to support underrepresented communities, and we're aligned in the need to support low to moderate income communities and women entrepreneurs. What is often missing, though, is the historical context and the historical understanding of why it's difficult to reach those communities. So, for example, I often reference my parents who are immigrants, refugees from Vietnam who came here, and started a restaurant when I was young, and I grew up in this restaurant. And when I sit here and I hear the city say, I don't understand why businesses aren't jumping at the bit to join this program because we're giving them free resources and paying for consultants for them. The reason is there's inherent mistrust with government, and it's been built over years and years. And I see this with my parents who have all throughout my years avoided any kind of interaction with the government. And even to this day, 40 years into business, have avoided applying for the PPP because they don't feel like that was meant for them, you know? And so understanding those dynamics means we shift the way that we approach attracting businesses into a platform like this. What I have to give props to the city for is they knew that they didn't truly understand how to navigate that process. And so they brought on partners that helped reach that. That meant the Asian Chamber, the Black Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, the East Valley Chamber, universities and Local First all put out their feelers to reach their market and brought people onto this network or onto this program called the Mesa Cares program. To be specific, the Asian Chamber went out to Asian grocery stores and sat there and translated the application for Asian businesses so that they could get into it. Hispanic Chamber did the same thing. Black Chamber has brought all of their advisors onto the network, and we continue to just find different ways to work those communities in so that we're creating access for as many people as possible. And the last thing I'll say is, I know that we're in COVID times, and so the question of how does the city continue to build trust, and the response is show up, right? Like continually, constantly show up, come to the meetings, be available. And the response often is how? Like when we're required to socially distance, how do we show up for these communities? How do we show we're here? And we conquered that by actually providing live chat, having everybody at the city that's responsible for being a part of this program actually on the platform tagging and activating within the platform and being visible. And it sounds like a lot, but it's literally 5 minutes a day that each case manager and economic developer is responsible for being on this platform. So the second piece that we worked on is just being collaborative. This was really difficult, I think, to navigate at first. How do you talk to a city and tell them everything they're doing is wrong? and that actually came about with building trust and not coming to them with problems, but coming to them with solutions. And so we set up weekly meetings with all of the city economic developers to keep them updated. Also reminded them of all of the progress, because oftentimes it's hard to see, and what's really helped is that live dashboard. So they have that running, they can have that running on any TV across their city. All of the city council members can easily reference that and see what webinars were held, how many people attended, where are they being hosted, how many people are watching the replays of the webinars in the library, how many people have booked advisement sessions on a day-to-day basis. The second advice that I give oftentimes when we talk about collaboration is honestly to be lazy. Like, you have a specific skill that you're really good at. You don't need to own the entire network of resources. Lean on those people. There's no way that I would be the best person to recruit our Hispanic Latino community, right? And so leverage those people who do that well and do that easily. So that would be that big piece. The fourth piece that I think often becomes overlooked at a city level too is the customer experience. And our customers in this case are entrepreneurs. And so I give the example of, on the left side is what the city put out in terms of their application process. And it continues on for 60 questions. And then somewhere around question 57 is a little button that says apply now. And it's literally all text. And this was how they had people apply for this program, which often explains why entrepreneurs aren't able to navigate this. This is your first experience with working with the city, and all you see is text and barriers. And so we worked with them on redesigning it with a one-pager that this scrolls a little bit, that just breaks down what is available within this program in a simple application process. It's literally the same application, actually. It's just presented differently. So UX actually is very important to make sure that people who often are intimidated and can't navigate systems like this can actually get through that process, which is what, again, led to this 98% onboarding rate. We also really worked to make sure that we had closed feedback loops. That meant on a regular basis, we're chiming in and asking how we're doing, which has continually led for more engagement. In terms of working with partners, we created scripts for everybody. Here's what you say when you need to onboard a participant that's been accepted. Here's what you say to invite somebody in. Here's what you say for every one of these things. Here's your script for social media to promote it, so that we're all working in tandem, because all of these organizations are incredibly busy. And so on top of that, we just continue to measure, get feedback, and reinvent every single time we've gotten feedback, because this is a time of crisis, so we need to move quickly. Again, community is our only scalable solution to help entrepreneurs in this critical time. Okay, so this is kind of the end of the process, but I wanted to leave you with some bloopers around just all of the hiccups that we have. One of the biggest things that we saw was, I think we often assume that people are more technically savvy than they really are. And so it was quite a shocker when we got the list of participants to onboard, and a lot of them had AOL accounts, and we're like, okay, this is definitely a signal for what we need to prepare for. And so a lot of the case management and support has been just around helping them navigate how to use tools, how to check their email and find things in spam, and be prepared for some of those things. We've navigated a lot of that with doing live webinars. I think people are actually pretty good at jumping on webinars at this point, but I give that as a blooper. Another one is don't provide your personal email address and phone number on email for help. Our engagement specialist, Chelsea, is basically responsible for our whole onboarding funnel, and she had mistakenly attached her personal email and her phone number, not personal, but her company email and her cell phone number to all of these emails that went out. And in one day, I think she got bombarded with calls on how to get onto the system and how to what to do next, right? Like I said, the technology effectiveness is there, but efficiency is not. And so we've shifted that now to actually a ticketing system. And so anybody who has a challenge can just run a ticket, and now everybody can help troubleshoot anything that comes up. And we're also building a knowledge base that will make it really easy, and a lot of videos that people can follow. And then the same thing goes to partner communication. One of the biggest hurdles we saw, because this was truly led by the city to start, was how to onboard partners and how people at the city that are considered case managers can loop in partners. So partner management. At the city level, what happened when we first started was every city so at the very beginning, there was 250 businesses that were onboarded in the first month. There were 3 case managers. They brought on 3 more. And let's say 5 case managers had 50 entrepreneurs that they had to support. And so every single time they assigned resources to them, they would go and email the entrepreneurs and then also CC all of the partners in the program. And so again, it became this flood of emails, which was incredibly overwhelming. And we had to sit down and say, this isn't working. This is how it should work. And now we just move into, like, we basically taken on the whole system and we divvy out the resources, and can manage that through our tracking technical assistance tool. And the last one, I will say, we organized a kickoff session with the mayor, and our mayor at the city of Mesa is pretty great. But to do a quick icebreaker, I talked about how much I love ranch. And then he continued to talk about ranch and condiments for the next 10 minutes. So that would be a recommendation, is to really focus on what needs to be focused on, and maybe prep the mayor if you're going to have a session like that. So this is the summary of what we've learned with HUUB, and we're constantly improving this. So if anybody wants to do a demo, I'd love to learn what challenges you're running into. If you're at the city level, what would be things that truly help you move away from pushing papers and tracking metrics, because we can do that. And what can we actually implement to make this easier for everybody as we move forward? So that's our quick overview. I'm open to any questions, and feel free to find me and email me with anything that comes to mind.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jenny. I think to your point on UX, hopefully we experienced that with our usability of the event platform with Pathable for ESHIP. And I think the onboarding, I don't know if folks had a chance to like listen to the video tutorial I had too, but it's like, how do we make sure that everyone's going to get a chance to like really know how to navigate everything? So really +1 on the UX and the onboarding. We did have one question come up on the side from Teresa for you. Are the advisors peer advisors or fellow business owners, or are they subject matter experts lending pro bono technical assistance?
No, they are funded by the city. So the city created a fund, and really purposely to support all of the businesses, right? Because those consultants are also business owners. And so we worked with them with that fund and said each advisor that joins this platform would get a max of 20 hours of consulting hours. It's truly consulting hours. We wanted to make sure that that was clear. It wasn't just, hey, let's have a session and I'm going to advise you. I'm literally going to build you your social media guide, or I'm going to rebuild your website and help you onboard to an e-commerce platform. Truly tactical things. So yes, consultants.
Awesome. Great to hear
Funded
that.
it. Yep.
Yes, paid for their expertise.
Paid for their expertise, correct.
Awesome. Any additional questions from folks? If not, I actually have a question or two for Jenny and Kenya. We have about 4 minutes left on time before we go into a little break. A question that I have, that if we don't see anything in the chat, both organizations, now we're with the spotlight, both organizations are so great at partnerships, and we know those take time and trust. I'm curious, with a lot of folks who are just trying to figure out, where do I start? Do you have any recommendations on where to start?
I would just say showing up. I go back to showing up. Like, I think you just need to start meeting those people and building relationships with those people that lead those different partner organizations, and understand what they really want to focus on, what their mission is. And I think with all collaboration, it's built to be win-win. So what are you going to be able to do to help them, and how will they eventually help you? I'd say that's where you start. And from there, I always ask when I meet a partner, like, who else should I meet that you know? And most people are really great at referring me on to the next person that I need to know.
Awesome, great.
Yeah,
Katie,
I'd build on that. Yeah, just to build on that, I think that idea of talk to one person and you'll get 2 more, and then you can kind of diagnose for yourself how all of those relationships work and where things are working and where things aren't. I also think like finding a small project or a small thing to experiment on is a good way of sort of building momentum over time. So, try things out, do a small project together, see what worked, and how to build from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie and Jenny. Anyone else have additional questions, either in the chat or if you want to raise your hand, we can also take you off mute. They were so succinct and so clear, and you all got all the things you needed for cross collaboration. So after ESHIP, we're going to see all these things sparking more in your communities. Awesome. Katie and Jenny, anything that you want to leave folks with in terms of any other tips? I feel like both of you are so, bless you, Jenny, are so good about just kind of like, you know, quick wisdom nuggets. Anything you want to leave the group with?
I guess I would say that I'm excited about the time we're in right now, not because it's painful. It is definitely painful to see all of the trauma that's happening with businesses, but I'm excited because in times of crisis like this is a time to really reinvent and reform and rebuild what we want to see the future to be. And so I would encourage everybody, I think one of the slides, I may have glossed over it, but to be vocal about it and to truly act upon it. I think at the city level, what I've seen is I actually thought they were way more, and I'm not speaking specifically about Mesa, but other cities as well, that I thought that they were a lot more organized and built out and structured than they truly were. And they really would appreciate that help if you're a technologist, and I sit between some of these seats, but if you're a technologist or you're in community building, any kind of support, I think this is the time where everybody wants to collaborate because we have one shared enemy at this point, right? And that's to come out of COVID stronger than ever. And so be vocal and suggest solutions. I think everybody's open to hearing, and I get excited because it's now time to innovate.
Thanks, Jenny. Katie, any closing words?
I think just to be quick, I think listen to those around you, and find those points of ideas to spark the next innovation. So
awesome. Well, big thanks to Jenny and Katie for their insights and sharing their stories.